What? Okay, so we're here for our first coffee chat with the counselor, and oh, hang on, let's turn it this way. There we go, so you don't get left out of the video.
Oh, you're good.
So with our guest, Ms. Rebecca Robbins, our school resource officer, and we have parents outside the view of the camera who can ask questions and we'll be in discussion. This time our recorded piece is on YouTube, but next time we have it figured out so that the Zoom link will record and will be on Zoom. So today, I'm just excited for people joining in, people coming back and watching later. We just want to talk about topics at hand. Today is based off of the 3 topics that come to my office from parents most often, which I've had so much fun getting to talk with parents as they've come in and asked me questions, and we've gotten to talk about their individual students, and so that's how I gained the idea for what topics to talk about today. But I would love to get your input on topics you would like to hear about. And we can bring in different guests according to different topics. So today our topics are going to be about sleep, about screen time safety, and then also about calming techniques. So I guess we'll start with sleep, and if anybody has questions, they can ask. Otherwise, I will just give a couple of tips that that I normally have talked about parents with, and then we can have discussion if need be, or we can move to the next topic. So, are there any questions on sleep? Well, if there's not, it's okay.
I have a quick one.
Okay.
So one of the things I think about is, one of the things I read is that if I don't get my child to sleep by their bedtime, if it drags on longer than I'd like, then they can't make that up, and it affects the rest of their week. I guess how do you think it affects kids if they don't get to sleep regularly? Like, so if we have an event like last night we went to our nativity scene practice, and it ran long, so we got to sleep a little bit later, and so I was worried about.
So not being an actual sleep expert, that's something I can kind of look into and give you like a good solid answer from like an expert, maybe a pediatrician I can talk to or something. But one thing that I, just off the top of my head, discussions I have had about sleep, one good option would be to maybe include a nap so that you can kind of fill in additional sleep, because one thing that I have been told is that kids, like when you fill out surveys, like at your pediatrician, and they ask you how many hours of sleep do they get, and it's a child who still naps, the nap is included in their hours of sleep. So that's something that I would think about, is if you could add like an after school nap in that day to kind of get them, a little more rested. But one thing I have been told by a psychologist recently is that their circadian rhythm adjusts most easily from the morning. So if they do go to bed late, it has been recommended to me by the psychologist that they wake up at their same time to try to keep their cycle in place. So that might help with that question. And that also helps if you have a child who their circadian cycle is like moving backwards. Like over the weekend, they're wanting to get up later and later, and then Sunday night they're wanting to go to bed late, and then it makes Monday morning count. So I've been told, and sometimes as parents we'll say, we're going to bed early tonight. Everybody's tired. We're going to bed early. We've got to get back on track. And that can work, but it can be difficult to get that child to go to sleep if they've like slept in too late. So that was what was recommended to me by the psychologist, was to get that child up early, and then they'll naturally go back into a rhythm that same night. So it's the fastest way to get them back on track. So it's kind of related, but a little bit different.
You could probably also try melatonin. It doesn't put them to sleep, but kind of helps to relax them a little bit. And some kids it doesn't work for, but some it does. And so that might help them to relax a little bit more to make them want to go to sleep. So.
And melatonin works best as a short-term tool. And definitely, your doctor, like if you realize that your child's having a hard time, definitely, because melatonin is an over-the-counter supplement. So it's sold over the counter, but you can talk with your doctor too. Um, but what can happen if, and I think this is something that has actually been discussed in my office with parents this year. They've talked about that their child has been on melatonin a long time. Oh, let's see. Hang on. I've got to add somebody else to the Zoom. Let's see. Are they in there? Hold on. They're in there? Okay. All right. Hi. Thanks for joining. So when we use melatonin for long term, and that's why like on the packaging it'll tell you to use it for like a short amount of time, and then check with your doctor. Because the longer we use the melatonin, our body starts to naturally think, oh, I'm getting the melatonin in my system. I don't need to naturally create that melatonin myself anymore. And the natural production of melatonin can decrease, and then it can start having an adverse effect. That's why melatonin is created to be a short-term tool. So ways that we can increase melatonin naturally is going to be reducing our blue light, reducing light in general, reducing stimulating activities toward bedtime so that our brain can start, because the circadian rhythm and melatonin production has a lot to do with the sun up and sun down, which with all of our modern conveniences of lights and technology, our brains get a little confused with that, so we don't necessarily rely on the sun and the moon like we used to in the many years ago. So reducing the light, so maybe switching to lamps if you can in the evening, so you have a dimmer light. Stopping the use of blue light screens earlier. If you do watch TV, like after dinner, making sure they're not sitting too close to it so that they're getting less blue light. You can use blue light blocking glasses. They have some really cute ones for kids that are helpful. So if they do have to do some homework and things, if it's in the evening, if you use those blue light blockers, it can help with the melatonin production. And then also creating a natural bedtime routine, things that they do before bed, like if they take a warm bath always before bed, some of those things that you do can create that routine, and the brain will start to hone in on that, and it helps with that production of melatonin. So a good bedtime routine. Sometimes it helps if they don't go to bed well to do things like reading books outside the bedroom. So maybe you read books as a family on the couch, so they're getting lots of good attention, where they feel all the love and all the attention, and for the bedtime routine. And then they understand that once they go to bed, the bed is for sleeping, and sometimes that can help too with that brain kind of switching into sleep mode. So those are some things. That'll transition a little bit into screen time safety. So let me go ahead and mention that in my previous school counseling position, I worked with middle schoolers. So I worked with screen time more than I do here, but I still work with it a lot here. And that's probably a misconception that elementary kids don't use screens as much, but they absolutely do. And I've always recommended, and this goes for sleep and for screen time safety, and then I'll let you talk about screen time safety a little bit. So 7 p.m. or earlier, I recommend that families have a time where they cut off the screen usage, particularly with devices. The TV is a little harder to get off early, but like devices, so iPads, cell phones, things like that. I recommend that they have a cutoff time, and then at that time they all go and charge in the parents' room. Not even really in the kitchen if you can help it, because that child could wake up in the middle of the night, go get a drink of water, and then, oh look, there's my iPad, and then before you know it, you have a child on their iPad at 3 in the morning, which can definitely interrupt their sleep and definitely cause some safety concern with, especially if they have internet access on that device. So that's another handy tip. And I would love for Officer Robbins to share a little bit with us about just in general some screen time safety for our kids.
So, phones and things are really common, especially for little kids to play with now. Wasn't so much when I was little. But now it's common for our itty bitties to even have a phone to play with, even if it's your old phone that just has Wi-Fi access, or if it has its own internet service. Um, Kids struggle with understanding that, hey, I'm just playing Roblox and I'm just chatting with my friend on here, and they have no idea who this friend is. So I've got a 10-year-old and she loves to play Roblox, and I have to explain to her, I don't want you to accept friend requests or chat with people that aren't your friends that you're playing with. And she couldn't understand why, and I had to explain to her that just because somebody pretends to be another child on there, it doesn't mean that they are a child. And a lot of predators will contact children on online games and things like that, and they will pretend to be a child. And once they start developing that friendship with them, then is when the danger becomes more prevalent. Um, Explain to your child to never give their personal information online. They should never give their phone number or their address, especially. Because we've had numerous cases where more so teenagers or young teenagers, your 12 to 14 range, who will meet someone online. They give their personal information, and then they end up meeting with that person. And you always want to think that, well, that's never going to happen to my child. But they're young, and they don't always understand that or make the best choices. So they think something may be harmless when in reality it can be very dangerous for them. So for them to understand that bad things can happen, and do all that we can to protect them from giving out that information or doing anything that could put themselves in harm's way.
And some of those games can be played without the internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those games can be played without that opportunity to meet people
Right.
across the world,
Yeah.
from that internet connection. So that's one thing to look into. Are the games and what options you have with settings for those
Right.
games and things like that.
And there's so many different apps and games and things online. Always know your child's password to any of the games that they're playing, or any of the apps that they're on. That way you can go in and check to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to, or um, even Facebook Messenger, things like that. So you can see their conversations, you can see what pictures they're sending, and things like that. So a lot of times kids don't, they're like, well, why do you need my password? Especially for the older children, not so much the younger children, because you're invading their privacy. But as a parent, that's your job, and they don't understand that, or they don't like that. But in order to protect your child better, that's something that I suggest, is always knowing their passwords and what they're on.
And in my class, I've talked to them about that. I've talked to them about not giving their password to other people other than their adults at home. So to keep them safe, so that another child can't hop onto um,
Their account.
their device and their account and cause them trouble. You know, especially with social media. You know, hopping on there and sending a mean message to somebody else, but it's under that student's name. And so I've talked with them about not giving their passwords out. But I've also told them that they should give their passwords to their adults, that their adults at home should have their password so they can help keep them safe. One other tip I have with that communication is having a proactive conversation about your social media usage or your online usage and things like that with your child, and letting them know that if they ever find themselves in a pickle, if they ever find themselves feeling like something's not right, and maybe even they broke a rule, that they weren't supposed to get online, but they did, and now this is happening. If you can create a safe talking environment with them, and letting them know, like, if you find yourself in trouble online, you will not be in trouble. Come to me. A lot of people automatically will say, you know, if you do this, you're going to lose all of your electronic privileges, and which is a totally understandable, relatable consequence. However, sometimes kids will go, oh, I can't tell mom that this person's being mean to me or that this person's scaring me online, because if I do, I won't get to use devices anymore. So then having an open dialogue where they don't, they'll still have consequences. But the consequences could be that they still get to use it, but they have to be under supervision, or they have to be in the living room with their parents instead of, being able to go to another room. Or maybe they only get to use their device at home. Things like that can be restricted, but letting them know that they are not going to be in trouble and that you're going to be there to support them, and to help them with that trouble. And one of the most important things, if your child ever receives anything inappropriate, any inappropriate pictures, requests for inappropriate pictures, and those kind of things, our law enforcement takes that very seriously, and you would want to report that to a law enforcement officer. And Rebecca Robbins here, our school resource officer, is a really great resource, and myself as well. If you ever find that your child is having an issue with inappropriate interactions online, come to us and we'll be happy to help you and get you connected with proper people to make sure your child is safe, and that you can navigate that situation with them, because it can be pretty difficult.
Yep.
So
there's also the ability, especially on Apple devices. I'm not as familiar with Android, but I'm sure that it's the same way. But you can also go into your settings, and you can also restrict certain websites that your child can go on. I know sometimes they love YouTube, and you can see some really good things on YouTube, and you can see some things that are not very appropriate as well. So you can restrict certain websites if you choose to do so.
I'll just hop on the YouTube comment for a second, because I have 3 kids at home, and there's some really fun things. And one of my kids loves to watch educational things on YouTube and has gained a lot of really neat experiences. There's a lot of neat things out there, but I will say that with YouTube, if YouTube can be watched in a means where the parents have earshot the whole time, it's really good, because YouTube can flip on a dime.
Yeah.
So they can be watching something, and something can be advertised, and they click on it, even if it's YouTube Kids, and it can flip on a dime, and before you know it, they're watching something that's completely inappropriate, and they may not even mean to. So having that parent where they can hear YouTube is really, really, really important. If it's a situation where your child needs to be watching something because you can't hear, like maybe you have a phone call you need to take, that's a good time to watch more like downloaded movies, things of that nature, TV shows, PBS Kids, for your littles, PBS Kids has some really great fun shows that the kids can watch on their app, and things like that. So think about that, making sure that you can hear YouTube, and it's just really important. One other thing I will tell you, and if you are on social media with me, you've seen me post about this, the Gab Wireless, and I don't get any like kickback from them at all. It's just personally what I use with my child. My child has a Gab watch, and you can restrict everything. They have their own phone number, but they can only receive and make calls to contacts that are put in for them through the app that you have on your phone. You can restrict what time they can use the phone. Outside of an emergency situation, it has GPS tracking. They can text, preset text. So you can get that means of communication, which can be super important. So if they go somewhere with friends, you can see where they are. They can call you if they feel uncomfortable. You can even have a secret text. Like, you text me this emoji if you feel uncomfortable, and I'll call and let them know I've got to pick you up for some reason. That way your child knows they can get out of an uncomfortable situation. And the Gab Wireless also has phones. I know there are some families here in our school whose junior high students use the Gab Wireless phones, and are very pleased with those. So if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to let you know. They've been running a sale where you get a free device with a 2-year contract, which is what I did at back to school time. So I got her watch for free instead of paying $200 for it. So it's a really cool option out there, to be able to have the communication without the danger. There's no internet connection, so that's good. And any other things on? There's so much about it,
Right.
and there are some. There's a really good Facebook group called Cyber Safe Teens, I believe is what it's called. I'm in the group. It's run by Officer Michael Lemon, who, are you familiar with him? He used to be a detective, right?
He's retired from Bowling Green Police Department.
And he runs a group on Facebook that's all about cyber safety for our kids, and it's pretty blunt, pretty straightforward. You can ask questions, and they have a lot of info on there, especially about apps. Because there's always a new app that us as parents are like, oh my gosh, I have to learn find out all about this, how to keep my kids safe on this app. So that's an option as well. So calming techniques. So I start all of my classes. Your child comes to me in one time. We have a 3-week rotation for related, and they come to me one time in that 3-week rotation. And every time they come to me, I teach one calming technique at the beginning of class. I always encourage them to go home and share with their adults the calming technique that we learned, because it can be used by the whole family. Some of the littles have really loved the starfish breathing, and hopefully they've told you. Where I've got some people nodding and doing it with me. So where you can trace your hand and breathe in as you go out, breathe out as you go down, and go back and forth and take 5 slow, deep breaths. Another one that I've taught your students is color breathing, and that's where they pick a color. It can be their favorite color, any color they want, and they can choose that color, and they look around the room, and every time they see that color, they take a deep breath in through their nose and then out through their mouth until they find that color 5 times. And that includes a skill we call grounding, which is kind of brings your mind to the present. Like, I'm in this room, I'm safe. Wherever their brain was daydreaming to that maybe made them nervous, or thinking about something that was, oh, I have to go to the doctor later and I'm nervous about it. Okay, no, you're right here in class, and look at all the colors around the room, and look at where you're at, and you're good, and you can focus on your work. So we've worked on that one as well. We've done several different activities, so I encourage you to talk to your students about the calming skills that we've learned in my class. Ask them what their favorite one is. Try it out as a family, and that way you can use those at home. And they can be, I use the same ones, that I teach the students. I use those personally, and my kids use them. And it can be helpful. And it doesn't mean that every time something's going on that everybody's just going to be all, perfectly calm, and we're going to do a calming technique and everything's going to be okay. It's not that way. It's just another tool in your toolbox for when your student may be upset. Maybe they're panicking because they forgot some schoolwork. Maybe they're panicking because they can't get their spelling words, under their belt this week. They're struggling with it and they're panicking. And it's good just to be able to help them. There's a whole thing about a dysregulated brain can't regulate a dysregulated brain. So that means that if the child, there's a model where you talk about and I can tell about this another time, I won't go into today, but where the brain, we call it flipping the lid, where the brain is dysregulated. So if we bring another dysregulated brain together, so everybody's panicking, right? Kids panicking, adults panicking, we're all panicking, and that happens to all of us. It does, for sure. Probably more often than any of us would like for it to, but it does happen. So there's no guilt there, but when we're dysregulated. So us as parents, if we can practice those tools with our students when we are all regulated, right? Like maybe it's dinner time and we want to practice one of those, then it becomes a little easier when our child becomes dysregulated, and we practice that with them to say, hey, let's do starfish breathing, even though we're about to flip our lid and be dysregulated too. But if we can all come together and practice something we've done, it can be helpful. So that's why I share those, because they're lifelong skills. That's why I teach them to the kids in class. And so I hope they're bringing those home to you. And if they are, or if they're not, ask them about their favorite one they've learned in my classroom, and you guys can practice it as a family. And any questions about calming or any other topics? And I want to get input from parents on topics that they would like to hear about in coffee chats. I'm excited we got to have our first one today. I've been excited about it, and I know it's a very busy time of year, but I plan to have them probably quarterly to start out, and I would love to have some feedback. And you can email me or message me on Dojo if there's a topic you would like to hear about, or if like if you want me to have an expert come in that can talk about a specific topic, we can have a guest come in to talk about a specific topic. So are there any other questions we want to talk about today, or concerns or feedback? Everybody good? Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here and joining in, and we will make sure to get info out about the next one, and email me or message me if you have ideas for topics. And you guys have a great day.
Thank you.